He was already walking away, and I was still holding the ring. My hand shook so badly I thought it might fall, but I couldn't let it go. My name is Lena, I'm 28 years old, and in that moment, everything I thought I knew about love and marriage shattered into pieces I couldn't pick up. He didn't even look back, not once. The papers were already signed, the ink barely dry. A courthouse hallway smelled like dust and old wood, and the silence between us was louder than the slam of any gavel. People passed by, strangers carrying folders, but none of them saw me unraveling. I wanted to call his name, but my throat locked. Cole, my husband, or at least the man who used to be. Just hours earlier, we sat in front of a judge, our voices flat, the words rehearsed like we'd practiced this break long before. When he slipped off his ring and set it on the table, his hand didn't even tremble. Mine did. I'm not sure which hurt more, his calm or my chaos. I pressed the ring into my palm until it cut, like I could force it to stay part of me. My chest burned, not from anger but from the cruel emptiness of realizing the man I loved had already walked away long before he stood up from that bench. He left like he had someplace better to be. That was the part one couldn't forgive, not yet. He didn't just leave me. He left as if I didn't matter. But we weren't always like this. We started with fire. I met him at the lowest point of my life, at my brother's funeral. People whispered condolences, faces blurred, but Cole stood out. He cracked some awkward joke that made me laugh when no one else could. That laugh tied me to him. I told myself anyone who could make me smile at a graveside was worth holding on to. Maybe that was the first red flag, clinging to the one man who made me forget grief, instead of facing it. Back then, he chased me with a kind of hunger that made me feel like I was the only woman alive. Long nights, long talks, promises made in parking lots and cheap diners. I fell fast, maybe too fast. My friends warned me, but I didn't listen. They said he was charming because he had to be, not because he wanted to be. They said men like him burn bright and burn out. I thought I'd be the exception. I was wrong. Now the memory of that smile, the one I loved so fiercely, feels like a cruel echo. I keep asking myself when we crossed the line from lovers to strangers, when his voice stopped sounding like safety and started sounding like blame. Some days I think it happened all at once. Other days I wonder if it happened so slowly I never saw it coming. The hallway was spinning that day. I forced myself outside, the Chicago air sharp against my skin, almost painful. It was freedom, but it felt like punishment. I walked without knowing where to go, clutching a useless ring like it still had magic. It was supposed to mean forever. Now it just meant failure. And somewhere inside me, I knew the story wasn't finished. Because when a love that deep dies, it doesn't stay buried. It leaves traces, scars that open when you least expect. I wasn't ready for what came next. Looking back now, I see how the first cracks formed. It wasn't about shouting matches or broken plates. It was quieter, sharper. His eyes started drifting past me, searching for something else, someone else, even if he never admitted it. I remember one night at dinner, his phone buzzing under the table. I laughed at a joke I made, but he didn't hear it. He was already lost in another world, another conversation. That silence between us stretched wider every day. He told me once, "You don't get it, Lena. You don't understand what it's like to want more." I wanted to scream that I was enough, that I was already giving him everything. But deep down, a voice whispered I wasn't. That's the cruelty of love. You start doubting yourself when the other person pulls away. Still, I stayed. I tried to patch holes I didn't even make. I bent myself into someone I thought he'd love again. I bought the dresses he liked, cooked the meals he wanted, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. None of it worked. The harder I tried, the colder he became. Until the day came when no effort mattered. Until today, when we walked into that courthouse together but walked out alone. I should have seen it coming. Maybe I did. But denial is softer than the truth, and I chose soft. The days that followed blurred into a strange mix of silence and noise. Friends called, offering pity I didn't want. My grandmother's voice on the phone was steady, almost too steady, when she said, "Baby, sometimes losing what you think you need is the only way to find what you're meant for." Her words felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I couldn't hold on to them yet. I stayed busy. Or at least I pretended to. I went back to work, smiled at coworkers who asked too many questions, lied with my teeth when I said I was fine. Nights were the worst. Nights made me honest. Lying in bed, I felt the weight of his absence pressing on me harder than his body ever had. The ring sat on my nightstand, daring me to throw it away, but I couldn't. I wanted to hate him. Instead, I hated myself for still loving him. But something was happening inside me, something I couldn't ignore much longer. At first, I thought it was stress, the way my body shook, the nausea, the exhaustion that came in waves. It wasn't until I stood in the bathroom, staring at two pink lines on a plastic stick, that the full storm hit. I wasn't just broken. I was carrying him. The man who walked away had left more than scars behind. He had left life growing inside me. And suddenly, the fight I thought was over had only just begun. He was already walking away, and I was still holding the ring. My hand shook so badly I thought it might fall, but I couldn't let it go. My name is Lena, I'm 28 years old, and in that moment, everything I thought I knew about love and marriage shattered into pieces I couldn't pick up. He didn't even look back, not once. The papers were already signed, the ink barely dry. A courthouse hallway smelled like dust and old wood, and the silence between us was louder than the slam of any gavel. People passed by, strangers carrying folders, but none of them saw me unraveling. I wanted to call his name, but my throat locked. Cole, my husband, or at least the man who used to be. Just hours earlier, we sat in front of a judge, our voices flat, the words rehearsed like we'd practiced this break long before. When he slipped off his ring and set it on the table, his hand didn't even tremble. Mine did. I'm not sure which hurt more, his calm or my chaos. I pressed the ring into my palm until it cut, like I could force it to stay part of me. My chest burned, not from anger but from the cruel emptiness of realizing the man I loved had already walked away long before he stood up from that bench. He left like he had someplace better to be. That was the part one couldn't forgive, not yet. He didn't just leave me. He left as if I didn't matter. But we weren't always like this. We started with fire. I met him at the lowest point of my life, at my brother's funeral. People whispered condolences, faces blurred, but Cole stood out. He cracked some awkward joke that made me laugh when no one else could. That laugh tied me to him. I told myself anyone who could make me smile at a graveside was worth holding on to. Maybe that was the first red flag, clinging to the one man who made me forget grief, instead of facing it. Back then, he chased me with a kind of hunger that made me feel like I was the only woman alive. Long nights, long talks, promises made in parking lots and cheap diners. I fell fast, maybe too fast. My friends warned me, but I didn't listen. They said he was charming because he had to be, not because he wanted to be. They said men like him burn bright and burn out. I thought I'd be the exception. I was wrong. Now the memory of that smile, the one I loved so fiercely, feels like a cruel echo. I keep asking myself when we crossed the line from lovers to strangers, when his voice stopped sounding like safety and started sounding like blame. Some days I think it happened all at once. Other days I wonder if it happened so slowly I never saw it coming. The hallway was spinning that day. I forced myself outside, the Chicago air sharp against my skin, almost painful. It was freedom, but it felt like punishment. I walked without knowing where to go, clutching a useless ring like it still had magic. It was supposed to mean forever. Now it just meant failure. And somewhere inside me, I knew the story wasn't finished. Because when a love that deep dies, it doesn't stay buried. It leaves traces, scars that open when you least expect. I wasn't ready for what came next. The weeks after the divorce were a blur. I moved through each day like a ghost, showing up to work, answering small questions, smiling when someone needed me to. But my chest felt like it had a hole punched through it. At night, the quiet inside my apartment pressed down on me until I thought I'd suffocate. I replayed the years with Cole in my head like broken film. The late-night drives when he swore we'd never let go of each other. The promises whispered on rooftops. The fights that started small, missed dinners, forgotten calls, and grew into silence so sharp it cut. Somewhere along the way, he began to look at me like I was an obligation instead of a choice. That look never left. I told myself I should hate him, but I couldn't. Not fully. Not when the love we shared still clung to me like perfume I couldn't wash off. Love like that doesn't vanish. It bruises. It lingers. My grandmother called often. Her voice was calm, too calm. Baby, sometimes you gotta lose what you think you need so you can find what God meant for you. I wanted to believe her, but her words slid past me. It was easier to bury myself in work, in errands, in anything that kept me from feeling too much. But my body betrayed me. The nausea started first, sharp and sudden. Then the exhaustion. At first, I blamed stress, grief, maybe even depression. But one night, standing in the bathroom with trembling hands, I watched 2 pink lines appear on a test that should have given me answers but only left me spinning. Pregnant. I sank onto the tile floor, clutching that tiny stick like it could explain what to do next. Pregnant with his child. The man who signed papers, who left me standing in a courthouse clutching a ring. I wanted to laugh and scream at the same time. How cruel was life, to tie me forever to the very man I was trying to forget. I didn't know if I should call him. I didn't know if I wanted him to know. But I knew one thing. My story wasn't ending in that courthouse. It was just beginning, and the next chapter was going to test me in ways I had never been tested before. The pregnancy changed everything. I kept it to myself at first, afraid of the judgment, afraid of Cole's reaction. My grandmother noticed before anyone else. She looked at me one Sunday over dinner and said quietly, "You're carrying more than pain, child." I broke down at the table, sobbing harder than I had since the day of the divorce. I thought about telling Cole every single day. I imagined the conversations, his shock, his denial, maybe even his anger. I imagined him rejecting me all over again, this time rejecting the part of me that was half of him. That thought nearly crushed me. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And Chicago is a small city when your life is tangled with his. Word would get out, eventually. I had to decide whether to face him on my own terms or let fate decide for me. Either way, the truth was coming. And nothing could prepare me for what happened when it finally did. I stayed up that night, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the city noise outside my window to drown out the storm inside my chest. It didn't. The longer I lay there, the more the memories clawed their way back. I thought about where it all began, before the courthouse, before the silence, before I ever knew what it felt like to be left holding a ring. I was 21 when I met Cole. Too young, too hungry for love, and too eager to believe a smile could save me. My brother's funeral was still fresh in my bones. The church smelled like lilies and grief. People spoke softly, offering comfort that felt rehearsed. Then there was him, tall, confident, out of place in that sea of sorrow. He cracked a joke, awkward but honest, about how he hated funerals because everyone pretended to like potato salad when they didn't. I laughed when I wasn't supposed to, and the sound startled me. He looked at me like I'd just given him something rare, something valuable. That moment tethered us. After the service, he found me outside, leaning against the stone steps. "You needed that laugh," he said. I didn't even know his name yet, but he was right. We talked until my ride came, and when he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe I was desperate to feel alive again. Either way, that was the spark. The first months were magic. He sent flowers to my job, waited outside my night classes, called just to say he missed my voice. He made promises with the ease of a man who believed in forever. I let myself believe it too. He had ambition that burned like fire, always talking about the future, the house we'd own, the trips we'd take. I mistook that hunger for stability. I mistook charm for truth. But my grandmother, wise as ever, saw through it. "Fire warms, baby," she told me, "but it also burns if you hold it too close." I brushed her off, convinced that love was worth any scorch. I wanted to prove her wrong, to show that my choice was solid. It wasn't all lies, though. Cole did love me, in his way. He brought me coffee in bed, held my hand in public, made me feel wanted. But even then, the shadows were there. The nights he disappeared without explanation. The way his temper snapped when things didn't go his way. The charm that won me over was the same charm he used to excuse his distance. I ignored those red flags, blinded by the warmth of being chosen. Years later, standing in that courthouse, I realized my grandmother had been right. Fire doesn't keep you alive. It consumes. Cole once told me I didn't understand what it meant to want more. Those words haunted me long after he left. He was the kind of man who chased bigger, faster, better. A nicer car, a better job, more recognition. Nothing was ever enough. Not even me. I watched him climb through life like it was a ladder only he could see. At first, I admired it. His drive made me feel safe, like he could carry us both. But as the years passed, I became more of a rung than a partner. He used my steadiness to push himself higher, while I stayed at the bottom, waiting for him to look back. He never did. The irony is, the more he chased more, the less he seemed to have. His laughter thinned out. His eyes hardened. He started spending long nights at work, then at networking dinners that didn't always add up. When I asked questions, he deflected. When I pushed, he shut down. I told myself he was stressed, that success had a price, and we'd cash in on the other side. But deep down, I knew better. Success wasn't the problem. It was his emptiness. He tried to fill it with everything: money, status, attention, but never with me. One night, I made his favorite meal. I lit candles, put on the dress he once said made me look unforgettable. He came home late, loosened his tie, and barely looked at the table. "I already ate," he muttered, scrolling through his phone. I sat there staring at the untouched plates, my chest aching with the weight of trying and failing. That was the night I realized love can't compete with hunger that has no bottom. Still, I stayed. Partly out of fear, partly out of hope, but mostly out of pride. I didn't want to admit my grandmother had been right all along. The night I told him about the pregnancy should have been different. It should have been private, tender, maybe even hopeful. Instead, it happened in the middle of a crowded restaurant, because fate has a cruel sense of humor. I'd gone to dinner with friends, trying to distract myself. I didn't expect Cole to walk in, dressed sharp, surrounded by colleagues. Our eyes met across the room, and for a second, time folded. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was real. My friends noticed, whispering, nudging me to ignore him. But I couldn't. My secret was boiling inside me, heavy and unbearable. When he finally walked over, the air tightened. His voice was smooth, polite, like we were strangers forced into a small talk. My hands shook around my glass. I don't even know why I said it then, why I blurted it out with no warning, no plan. "I'm pregnant, Cole." The words hung in the air, louder than the clinking of silverware, louder than the laughter around us. His face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. His colleagues stared, and my friends froze. I wanted to rewind, to shove the words back inside me, but it was too late. The truth was out. He didn't say anything at first. He just stared at me, eyes sharp, searching, maybe even accusing. And then he turned and walked out, just like he had at the courthouse. Only this time, he left me not as his wife, but as the mother of his child. I sat there trembling, every eye in the restaurant glued to me. I wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the floor. But I didn't. I held my head high, even as my chest collapsed inside me. Because I knew this was just the beginning of a storm bigger than anything I had faced. The next morning, I woke up to a pounding on my door. For a moment, I thought it was Cole, ready to face me. My heart raced as I pulled it open. But it wasn't him. It was my grandmother, her face lined with worry, holding a bag of groceries. She didn't say anything at first. She just pulled me into her arms. I cried against her shoulder, the kind of cry that empties you out. When I finally calmed, she cupped my face. "This child is not a curse, Lena. It's a calling. Don't let his absence make you forget your strength." I wanted to believe her. But later that week, the pain started, sharp, unbearable cramps that sent me collapsing to the floor. My vision blurred, and I remember thinking, not like this. Not alone. Not without him knowing. The ambulance lights painted my walls red and blue. Strangers lifted me onto a stretcher, voices muffled by the pounding in my ears. I thought I might lose the baby, lose everything. And somewhere in that chaos, I heard one clear thought cut through: Cole doesn't even know. When I woke in the hospital, the doctor's words swirled around me like smoke. Complications. High risk. Close monitoring. I nodded through the fog, clutching my stomach, whispering promises to the life inside me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for both of us. And the man who once walked away was about to be pulled back into my life whether he wanted it or not. I couldn't shake the sound of that hospital monitor. The steady beep, sharp and merciless, became the drum in my head long after I left. It was the sound of my reality, the sound that reminded me everything had changed. Every decision from here on carried the weight of 2 lives. And yet, Cole was still out there, living like nothing tethered him, like I wasn't carrying the very thing that tied us forever. I wanted to call him, to scream at him, to demand he show up. But pride locked my lips. Fear too. What if he rejected not just me, but the child? What if my confession had already sealed his absence? These thoughts swirled in me as I sat in that cold hospital room, clutching the thin blanket like it could hold me together. My grandmother stayed by my side through it all. She held my hand, prayed over me, reminded me that women before me had carried heavier burdens and still survived. But there was one thing even her strength couldn't cover: the gnawing silence from Cole. Days passed. No call, no visit, nothing. And that silence hurt worse than the cramps in my body. I thought about him constantly, about how his face looked when I told him. That shock, that emptiness in his eyes. I wondered if he was drinking it away, working it away, or pretending it had never happened. And every time I wondered, I hated myself for still caring. One evening, the nurse walked in with a small envelope. "This came for you," she said, placing it on the tray. My heart jumped. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was from Cole. I tore it open with trembling hands, only to find a bill reminder from the clinic about insurance. No note, no apology, no acknowledgement. Just another cold reminder that life doesn't wait for your heart to heal before it adds new weight. That night, I promised myself something. If Cole wasn't going to step up, I would. I would build a world for my child, with or without him. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Men like Cole don't disappear forever. They circle back, always when it hurts most. The first time Cole showed up again, it wasn't at my door. It was in the waiting room of the same hospital that had become my second home. I walked in for a routine check, tired but determined, and there he was, leaning against the wall, eyes locked on me like no time had passed. I froze. My hands instinctively went to my stomach, protective, defensive. His gaze followed the movement, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw something. Fear, maybe even regret. But then his charm slid back into place like armor. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of my tears, so I sat down across from him, steady as I could. "Now you want to talk?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut the air. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I wasn't ready that night. You dropped a bomb in front of half the city. I didn't know what to do. My anger burned. So you left. Like you always do." He looked away, jaw tight. "I messed up. But Lena, I need to be part of this. Of them." His eyes flicked to my belly, and for the first time, he said the word without saying it. "Them." I wanted to scream. I wanted to believe him. Both urges tangled in my chest until I could hardly breathe. "You don't get to pick and choose when you're a father, Cole. Either you're in, or you're gone for good." His silence stretched. And in that silence, I realized the cliff I was standing on. If I let him back in, he could shatter us both again. If I kept him out, I'd be raising this child alone. Either choice would scar. Before he could answer, the nurse called my name. I stood up, my body trembling with the weight of the moment. I walked past him without looking back. But I knew. Oh, I knew. This was only the beginning of a battle I wasn't ready for. Pregnancy doesn't pause for drama. My body changed faster than my heart could catch up. The mornings were brutal, the nights restless. But with every kick, every flutter inside me, I found a strange new strength. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about the life I was building, even if the foundation was cracked. My grandmother became my anchor. She came to appointments, cooked meals, whispered stories of women who raised children through wars, heartbreak, poverty. "You got this in you too," she said, placing her weathered hand over mine. But then the phone calls started. Cole again. At first, I ignored them. Then the texts came. "Please. I need to see you. We can figure this out." His persistence wore me down. Part of me wanted to shut him out completely, but another part, the part still tethered to the boy who once made me laugh at a funeral, kept listening. One night, he showed up uninvited. My grandmother nearly shut the door on him, but I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence thick. He reached across the table, his hand hovering like he wanted to touch mine but wasn't sure he had the right anymore. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But running won't fix it. I want to try, Lena. For real this time." The words should have comforted me, but they only twisted the knife. How many times had he promised, for real? How many times had I believed? I stared at him, at the man who had broken me and yet still had a piece of me. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know if I could ever truly let him go. The breaking point came weeks later, in the middle of another hospital visit. The doctors spoke in clipped tones, words like monitoring and risk factors swirling around me. I tried to stay calm, but fear gnawed at me. And then, Cole barged into the room. He wasn't supposed to be there. He hadn't been invited. But there he stood, demanding answers from the doctor like he had a right. I wanted to tell him to leave, to scream that his presence was only making it worse. But when the doctor explained the risks, the possibility of losing the baby if stress wasn't managed, something in me snapped. I turned to Cole, my voice low but shaking with fury. "If you can't be the calm, if you can't be the steady, then leave. Because I will not lose this child over your chaos." His face crumbled, and for once, he had no comeback, no defense. He just stood there, broken, as the reality sank in. And as the room went silent, I felt it, the shift. The moment when love dies and survival takes its place. But survival doesn't mean the battle is over. It just means you're ready to fight a different war. He was standing in the hallway again, his shoulders hunched like the walls themselves were pressing down on him. I hadn't seen him in days, not since the night I told him to leave if he couldn't be steady. And yet here he was, waiting like a shadow I couldn't shake. I almost turned around, but something in his eyes stopped me. Not the usual charm, not that sly grin I once fell for, but something heavier. "I can't keep doing this, Lena," he said quietly. His voice carried more weight than I was used to. "Not the running, not the hiding. I know I've been poison in your life. But I can't stay away from you. Or from them." The words stung and soothed all at once. Part of me wanted to believe him, to fall into that warmth I had missed for months. But another part, the stronger part, remembered the nights of silence, the abandoned calls, the endless excuses. "You don't get to choose when to care, Cole," I whispered back. "You either show up every day or you stop pretending you can." The hallway seemed to shrink. Nurses passed, papers shuffled, but none of it mattered. It was just us, stuck in the same storm we'd never escaped. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his breath. "Then let me show up," he said. "This time, don't push me out." My heart was a battlefield. One side screamed to let him in, the other screamed to run before he destroyed me again. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just walked past him, holding my stomach like it was my only anchor. That night, I cried harder than I had in months. Not because I wanted him gone, but because I didn't know if I could survive him staying. The days blurred after that. Doctor visits, restless nights, my grandmother's steady prayers. I kept telling myself I didn't need him, but his presence lingered like perfume I couldn't wash off. And then the call came. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number. Late night. But something inside me said pick up. "Lena." His voice cracked through the line, urgent, broken. "I messed up again. I'm at the station. I need you." My pulse quickened. I wanted to hang up, to let him drown in the choices he made. But instead, I found myself grabbing my coat and rushing into the night. When I saw him, he was sitting on the curb outside the station, face bruised, hands shaking. Not drunk. Not high. Just empty. He looked up at me like a boy who'd lost his way home. "I keep screwing everything up," he muttered. "But I don't want to lose you. Not now. Not ever." The tears I'd been holding back poured out. I knelt in front of him, gripping his face in my hands. "Then stop choosing chaos, Cole. Choose us." The silence that followed was heavy. But for once, he didn't pull away. He just nodded, eyes wet, as if the weight of those words finally landed. When labor came, it wasn't like the stories. It wasn't soft music and gentle hands. It was chaos, sweat, fear. My grandmother on one side, nurses rushing, doctors muttering terms that made my head spin. And through it all, Cole was there. He held my hand, tighter than I expected. He whispered over and over, "You got this, Lena. You got this." His voice was steady, his eyes locked on mine, and for the first time in years, I believed him. Hours later, when the cries filled the room, something in me broke open. I held the tiny body against my chest, tears spilling freely. Life. Fragile, loud, undeniable life. Cole stood beside me, his hand trembling as he touched the baby's head. His face was unreadable, fear, awe, guilt, maybe all of it. "We did this," he whispered. I wanted to believe it was the start of something new. But deep down, I knew better. Babies don't fix broken men. They only expose the cracks deeper. The weeks after were a blur. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, the strange rhythm of a new life. Cole tried. God, he tried. He showed up with groceries, rocked the baby to sleep, even sang softly in the kitchen when he thought no one was listening. But cracks appeared quickly. Missed calls. Late nights. Excuses that didn't line up. The old patterns creeping back in like smoke under a door. I confronted him one night, my voice sharp with exhaustion. "If you want to be here, then be here. But I won't raise a child on broken promises." He flinched, like the truth cut deeper than any insult. "I'm trying, Lena," he said, his voice low. "But I don't know how to be the man you need." I looked at him then, really looked. And for the first time, I accepted the truth I had avoided for years. Cole wasn't my forever. He was my lesson. My heartbreak. My almost. I turned away, clutching the baby close. "Then learn. Or let us go." The last time I saw him, he didn't leave with a fight. He just stood in the doorway, eyes fixed on the crib, his face soft in a way I'd never seen. "I love you both," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe loving you means stepping back before I ruin everything." And just like that, he was gone. No slam of the door, no storm of words. Just silence. I stood in that silence for a long time, rocking the baby, feeling the weight of what love had cost me. He wasn't walking away because he didn't love us. He was walking away because love alone wasn't enough. And maybe, just maybe, that was the hardest truth of all.